The Instagram notification pinged while I was debugging code at my home office. Father's Day morning, 10:30 a.m., and I'd been up since dawn wrestling with a payment processing algorithm that kept throwing errors. The notification was from my nephew Tyler, Kyle's oldest kid. I almost ignored it, but something made me tap the screen. The photo hit me like a punch to the gut. Dad, my brother Kyle, and Kyle's two boys, all wearing matching World's Best Fisherman t-shirts, grinning on the deck of Dad's boat. The caption read, "Annual Father's Day fishing trip with the real family. # blessed, row family, tradition. Real family." I stared at the phone, my coffee growing cold. Annual tradition? This was the first I'd heard of it. I checked the timestamp, posted 20 minutes ago. They were out there right now, having the time of their lives, while I sat alone in my Seattle house, thinking they were all sleeping in after yesterday's barbecue. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the comments. Aunts and uncles I hadn't seen in months, all chiming in with heart emojis and so sweet responses. My cousin Jenny wrote, "Love seeing 3 generations of Reed men together." 3 generations. Dad, Kyle, and Kyle's boys. No mention of me. No "where's Tom" or missing Uncle Tom. Just pure unadulterated family bliss without the disappointment. I called Dad's cell. It rang 4 times before he picked up, and I could hear laughter and boat engines in the background. "Tommy, what's up, son?" His voice was cheerful, distracted, happy. "I saw Tyler's photo," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Looks like you guys are having fun." A pause. The background noise seemed to dim, like he'd moved away from the others. "Oh, yeah, well, you know how it is. Spur of the moment thing." Spur of the moment. Tyler called it an annual tradition. Another pause, longer this time. When Dad spoke again, his voice had changed. Cooler, more careful. "Look, Tommy, I don't know what you want me to say here. I want you to explain why my entire family is on a Father's Day fishing trip and I'm finding out about it from social media. Because you're not part of this family the way they are." The words hit me like ice water. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it for a second, wondering if I'd heard wrong. What does that mean exactly? Dad sighed, the kind of a long-suffering sigh he used to make when I'd bring home B's instead of A's, when I chose computer science over business, when I married Allison instead of the banker's daughter he'd picked out. "It means you're a disappointment, Tommy. It means I don't tell people you're my son. It means Kyle's boys are the grandsons I'm proud of, and Kyle's the son who turned out right. You want the truth? There it is." I felt something crack inside my chest. 39 years old, and my father had just told me he was ashamed of me, on Father's Day, while he was making memories with his real family. "Dad, hold on. Your mother wants to talk to you." I heard muffled conversation, then Mom's voice came on the line. "Tommy, honey, why are you making problems again? Can't you just let them enjoy their day?" "Making problems? Mom, I wasn't even invited to—" "You're always stirring up drama. Your father and Kyle deserve to have a nice time without you analyzing everything and making it complicated. You know how you get." "How I get?" "Right. The family scapegoat. Always causing trouble by existing, by having feelings, by expecting to be treated like I mattered." "Understood," I said quietly. "Good. Now we'll see you next weekend for Kyle's birthday, okay? Try to be positive for once." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in my office for a long time, staring at that photo. Dad's arm around Kyle's shoulders, Kyle's hands on his boys' heads, 3 generations of Reed men, all wearing matching shirts, all belonging to something I'd never been part of. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I started with my phone, blocked Dad's number, Mom's number, Kyle's number, all my cousins and aunts and uncles, deleted my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, every platform where the Reed family could find me or track me down. Changed my locks, because Kyle had a spare key. Canceled my subscription to the local newspaper, because Mom liked to clip out articles about my software company and save them, though she never actually read them or understood what I did for a living. I disappeared from the Reed family completely. No explanation, no goodbye, no forwarding address. Just silence. What they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask about, was that their disappointment of a son had built something extraordinary. While Dad and Kyle were playing happy family on that boat, I was sitting on a secret that would have changed everything. But they'd never asked, and now they'd never know. 3 years ago, I'd sold my payment processing startup to a Fortune 500 company for $14 million. Not the company I worked for now. That was just my cover, my way of staying busy and keeping up appearances. The real money was sitting in investment accounts they didn't know existed, growing quietly while I lived in my modest Seattle house and drove my 5-year-old Honda. $14 million. More money than Dad had made in his entire career as a middle manager at the insurance company. More than Kyle's construction business would gross in a decade if it lasted that long. I'd built the company from my garage, working 18-hour days while Allison complained about my obsession with work. The software I'd created processed microtransactions for gaming companies, handling millions of tiny payments with zero lag time. When Microsoft came knocking with their offer, I'd almost called Dad to share the news. Almost. But something had stopped me. Maybe it was the way he'd dismissed my computer stuff at Christmas dinner the year before. Maybe it was Kyle's comment about how I should get a real job instead of playing with toys. Maybe it was Mom's suggestion that I should be more like Kyle. Married young, kids early, steady construction work that people could understand. So I'd kept quiet. Signed the papers, deposited the check, and continued living like a middle-class software engineer. The only person who knew was my accountant, and he was paid well to keep his mouth shut. Now, sitting in my office 3 days after the Father's Day incident, I pulled up my investment portfolio and smiled grimly. 14 million had become 18 million. The market had been very good to me. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Someone had gotten through my blocks. "Tommy, it's Kyle. We need to talk. Call me." I deleted the message without responding. Another buzz. "This is serious. Dad's in trouble. We all are." Delete. A third message, longer this time. "Look, I know you're pissed about the fishing thing, but this is bigger than that. Dad co-signed some loans for my business and things went sideways. We're looking at bankruptcy, both of us. I need to ask you for help." I stared at that message for a long time. Kyle's construction business was failing. Dad was on the hook for the loans. They were facing bankruptcy, and they wanted my help. I thought about that photo again. The matching shirts, the real family caption, Dad's words echoing in my head. "You're a disappointment. I don't tell people you're my son." I deleted the message and blocked the number. Over the next 2 weeks, they tried everything. Different phone numbers, emails, even showing up at my old address. The house I'd sold 6 months ago without telling them. I watched from my security cameras as Kyle pounded on the door of strangers, demanding to know where I'd gone. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, called to tell me that a woman claiming to be my mother had been asking questions about my whereabouts. "I told her I didn't know any Tom Reed," Mrs. Patterson said with satisfaction. She seemed very upset. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. I appreciate your discretion. Family trouble, dear?" Something like that. The private investigator they hired was more competent than I'd expected. It took him 3 weeks to track me down to Seattle and another week to find my actual address. I had to admire his persistence. On a Tuesday morning in late July, exactly 42 days after the Father's Day incident, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw them standing on my front porch like a delegation of ghosts. Dad looking older and grayer than I remembered. Mom clutching her purse like a shield. Kyle shifting his weight from foot to foot, his face flushed with embarrassment or anger or both. They'd found me. I could have pretended I wasn't home. Could have waited for them to give up and leave. But something in Dad's posture, the way his shoulders sagged, the way he kept glancing at Kyle like he was looking for support, told me this wasn't a social visit. I opened the door. "Hello, Tommy," Dad said quietly. His eyes were red-rimmed and he looked like he'd lost weight. "What do you want?" I kept my voice neutral, professional, the way I talked to difficult clients. "We need to talk to you," Mom said, stepping forward. "It's important." "More important than your real family?" Dad flinched like I'd slapped him. "Can we come in?" Kyle asked. "Please?" I considered it. They looked desperate, all three of them. Whatever had brought them to my door had cost them something, pride maybe, or hope. "No," I said finally. "We can talk out here." "Tommy, please," Mom started, but I held up a hand. "You have 5 minutes. Start talking." Kyle glanced at Dad, then back at me. "It's about the business, the loans Dad co-signed. We're in serious trouble." "How serious?" $890,000, Dad said quietly. "In liens, back taxes, contractor disputes. The business is done. I'm on the hook for most of it. I let that number hang in the air between us. $890,000. It might as well have been $8 million to them. We were hoping, Kyle continued, that maybe you could help us out, just until we get back on our feet. Help you out how? A loan, Mom said quickly. We'd pay you back, of course, with interest. I almost laughed. They wanted a loan. From the disappointment. From the son Dad didn't claim. From the family member who wasn't part of the real family. How much? I asked. They exchanged glances. Kyle cleared his throat. Well, if we could cover the liens and the immediate debts, maybe $400,000? $400,000. Less than 3% of what I was worth, but they were asking for it like it was the moon. Why should I help you? The question seemed to catch them off guard. Dad opened his mouth, closed it again. Mom looked confused, like she couldn't understand why I'd even ask. Because we're family, she said finally. Are we? I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app. Hit record. Dad, tell me again what you said on Father's Day about me being part of this family. His face went pale. Tommy, tell me what you said. A long silence. Kyle was staring at his shoes. Mom was looking back and forth between Dad and me like she was watching a tennis match. I was upset, Dad said finally. I didn't mean... You said I wasn't part of this family the way Kyle is. You said I was a disappointment. You said you don't tell people I'm your son. Is that correct? Another silence. Yes, he whispered. I stopped the recording and put my phone away. Then why exactly would I give you $400,000? Dad started crying right there on my porch. Not the quiet, dignified tears of a man facing hardship, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone who'd run out of options. His shoulders shook, and he had to lean against the porch railing to stay upright. Because I'm dying, he said through the tears. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my carefully maintained composure crack. What? Kidney disease, Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. Stage 4. He needs a transplant. Kyle stepped forward. We've all been tested. I'm not a match. The boys are too young. You're the only one left, Tommy. You're the only one who can save him. I stared at them, trying to process what I was hearing. Dad was dying. He needed a kidney. And I was his only hope. How long? I asked. 6 months, maybe less, Dad said, wiping his eyes. The doctors say I need to be on the transplant list, but with my age and the waiting times, he trailed off. So you need my kidney and my money. The bluntness of it seemed to shock them. Mom gasped. Kyle's face flushed red. It's not like that, Mom protested. Isn't it? You show up here after 42 days of silence, tell me Dad's dying and Kyle's business is failing, and ask for my kidney and $400,000. What exactly is it like? We're desperate, Kyle said. We wouldn't be here if we weren't desperate. You weren't desperate on Father's Day. You were having a great time with your real family. Dad looked up at me, his eyes pleading. I was wrong, Tommy. I was wrong about everything. I'm sorry. Are you sorry because you're dying, or are you sorry because you said it? He didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. I thought about the $18 million sitting in my investment accounts. I thought about the kidney I could give him, the life I could save. I thought about the family that had never wanted me until they needed me. I'll make you a deal, I said finally. Hope flickered in their eyes. Full public apology, social media, extended family, everyone. You acknowledge the years of favoritism, the way you treated me, everything. You admit that you were wrong and I was the son you should have been proud of all along. The hope died quickly. Tommy, Mom started. That's the deal. You have 48 hours to decide. You can't be serious, Kyle said. You want him to humiliate himself publicly? The way he humiliated me privately for 39 years? Yes. Dad straightened up and I saw a flash of the old stubbornness, the pride that had defined him my entire life. I won't do it, he said quietly. Then you'll die waiting for a donor. Tommy! Mom's voice was sharp with shock. Those are the terms. Take them or leave them. Kyle stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists. You heartless bastard. He's your father. Is he? Because according to him, I'm not his son. This is insane, Kyle continued. You're going to let him die over your hurt feelings. I'm going to let him die over his choices. The same way he was willing to let me die inside over his words. Dad was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe the disappointment he'd dismissed for so long had finally grown teeth. 48 hours, I repeated and went back inside. I watched through the window as they stood on my porch for another 10 minutes, arguing in heated whispers. Kyle kept gesturing at the door, probably suggesting they try to force their way in. Mom kept dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Dad just stood there, looking defeated. Finally, they walked back to Kyle's truck and drove away. I poured myself a drink and sat in my living room, thinking about choices and consequences. They'd made their choice on Father's Day when they decided I wasn't worth including. When they decided that I was the disappointment, the family member who didn't matter. Now I was making mine. 46 hours later, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized Kyle's voice when I answered. He won't do it, Kyle said without preamble. Dad won't make the apology. Then we have nothing to discuss. Tommy, please, he's proud. You know how he is, but he's sorry. I can see it in his eyes. Sorry isn't enough anymore. What if I apologize? What if I make the post, acknowledge that we treated you wrong? It's not your apology I want. Kyle was quiet for a long moment. He'd rather die than admit he was wrong about you. Then that's his choice. You're really going to do this? You're really going to let our father die? I'm not letting him do anything. I'm just not saving him from the consequences of his own actions. The kidney, Tommy. Even if you won't give us the money, what about the kidney? I thought about that for a long time. The kidney was different from the money. The kidney was about life and death, not pride and punishment. Same terms, I said finally. Public apology or nothing. Kyle hung up without another word. Dad lasted 4 months. The call came on a Tuesday morning in November. Mom crying so hard I could barely understand her words. He's gone, Tommy. Your father is gone. I felt something twist in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. I'm sorry for your loss. Your loss too, she said through the tears. He was your father. Was he? She hung up. I didn't go to the funeral. I watched the live stream instead, sitting in my home office with a cup of coffee, observing the service like a stranger. Kyle gave the eulogy, talking about Dad's integrity and strength, his devotion to family. He never mentioned me. Not once. The church was packed. Coworkers, neighbors, extended family, friends from the golf club, all there to celebrate the life of a man who died rather than admit he was wrong about his son. After the service, I saw Kyle and Mom standing by the casket, accepting condolences. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by grief and the weight of what they'd lost. Not just Dad, but the money and kidney that could have saved him. I closed the laptop and went back to work. The will reading was a week later. I wasn't invited, but I didn't expect to be. Dad had made his feelings clear enough while he was alive. Kyle called me afterward, his voice hollow with exhaustion. He left everything to me, Kyle said. The house, the savings, everything. Mom gets to stay in the house until she dies, but it's all mine. Congratulations. Doesn't matter. The creditors are going to take it all anyway. The liens, the business debts, they're going after his estate now. We're going to lose everything. I didn't respond. The house he grew up in, Tommy, the house where we played as kids, they're going to take it. That's unfortunate. Kyle's voice turned angry. You could still help us. You could pay off the debts, save the house. Mom's going to end up in some state-run nursing home because of this. That's not my responsibility. She's your mother. Is she? Because I seem to remember her telling me to stop making problems when I called on Father's Day. Kyle was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, broken. We lost everything, Tommy. Dad's gone. The business is gone. We're going to lose the house. And for what? Pride? Stubbornness? You tell me. You were there when he made his choice. He was scared. Scared of admitting he'd been wrong his whole life. Scared of looking weak. And now he's dead. Yeah, now he's dead. Kyle hung up, and I never heard from him again. 3 weeks later, I got a call from a lawyer handling Dad's estate. They were liquidating everything to pay the creditors, but there were some personal items that needed to be dealt with. Photo albums, personal papers, things that had no monetary value but might have sentimental worth. The family asked me to contact you, the lawyer said, to see if you wanted anything before we dispose of it. I thought about it for a moment. Photo albums full of pictures I probably wasn't in. Personal papers documenting a life that had never included me as anything more than a disappointment. No, I said, I don't want anything. But that wasn't entirely true. 2 days later, I drove to the house where I'd grown up. The for sale sign in the front yard had a red foreclosure banner across it. The windows were dark, the lawn overgrown. It looked abandoned, forgotten. I used my old key. The locks hadn't been changed since I was 18. The house smelled like dust and regret. I found what I was looking for in Dad's desk drawer. The Father's Day card I'd made him when I was 7 years old. Construction paper and crayon, with a drawing of the two of us fishing together. World's best dad written in my careful second-grade handwriting. He'd kept it all these years, through moves and cleanings and decades of disappointment in the son who'd made it, hidden in his desk like a secret shame. I took the card and left everything else behind. 6 months later, Mom called from the assisted living facility where she'd ended up after losing the house. "Tommy, it's your mother. I know who you are. I was wondering, could you come visit me? I don't get many visitors, and I've been thinking about things, about what happened. What about it? I think maybe we were wrong. About you, I mean, the way we treated you." Too little, too late. But something in her voice, loneliness maybe, or genuine regret, made me soften slightly. "I'll think about it," I said. "There's something else. Kyle's in trouble again. Different kind of trouble this time. He's been drinking and he got arrested for..." I hung up. That night, I made an anonymous donation to the assisted living facility where Mom was staying, enough to cover her expenses for the rest of her life, with a little extra for comfort and care. The donation came with specific instructions. She was never to know where the money came from. I visited her once 6 months later, just to see how she was doing. She didn't recognize me at first. I'd grown a beard and lost some weight. When she finally realized who I was, she started crying. "Tommy, is it really you? Hello, Mom. I've been hoping you'd come. I've been praying for it." We talked for an hour. She told me about the facility, about how well they treated her, about the mysterious benefactor who'd paid for everything, and she told me Kyle was in rehab, trying to get his life together. She told me she missed Dad every day and that she regretted the way things had ended. "He regretted it too," she said. "At the end, he kept talking about you. Kept saying he should have been a better father, but not enough to apologize. No, not enough for that." When I left, she hugged me tight and made me promise to visit again. I promised, knowing I probably wouldn't. Some doors, once closed, are better left that way. I learned that from them. But this story isn't really about my family. That was just the beginning, the crack in the foundation that brought everything else tumbling down. The real story is about what happened when I got home from that last visit with Mom. When I walked into my house and found my wife Allison sitting at the kitchen table with divorce papers and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We need to talk," she said. I'd been married to Allison for 12 years, met her in college, married her right after graduation, built what I thought was a solid life together. She was beautiful, ambitious, working her way up the corporate ladder at a PR firm downtown. We had a nice house, nice cars, nice friends. The American dream packaged and delivered. What I didn't know was that she'd been having an affair with her business partner, Jared Taylor, for the better part of 2 years. "I want a divorce," she said without preamble. "I've already filed the papers." I sat down across from her, still processing. "Can I ask why?" "We've grown apart, Tom. We want different things. I need someone who understands ambition, who can match my energy. Someone like Jared?" Her face flushed, but she didn't deny it. "This isn't about Jared, isn't it? This is about us, about how we've become strangers living in the same house." I thought about the $18 million she didn't know about, the success she'd never bothered to ask about, the ambition she'd dismissed as computer stuff for over a decade. "What do you want?" I asked. "Half of everything. The house, your 401k, savings." I think that's fair. Half of everything she knew about, which was basically nothing. My salary from the software company, the modest savings account, the house we'd bought together. She had no idea about the real money, the investments, the fortune I'd built, while she was climbing the corporate ladder and apparently climbing Jared. And if I fight it, then it gets messy and expensive for both of us. I looked at the woman I'd loved for 12 years, the woman I'd supported through graduate school and career changes and family drama, the woman who was now sitting across from me like a stranger, dividing up our life like a business transaction. "I'll sign," I said. Relief flickered across her face. "Good. I think that's best for everyone. On one condition." The relief turned to wariness. "What condition? I want to know why, the real reason, not the growing apart BS, not the different goals speech. I want the truth." She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face like she was trying to decide how much honesty I could handle. "You're boring, Tom. You're safe and predictable and boring. You come home, you work on your computer, you watch Netflix, you go to bed. You don't take risks, you don't dream big, you don't push for more." More of what? More everything. More money, more excitement, more life. Jared understands that. He's building something, creating something bigger than himself. I almost laughed. Jared was building something, all right. A house of cards that would collapse the moment someone looked at it too closely. His business ventures were half-baked schemes funded by other people's money, the kind of flashy nonsense that impressed people who didn't understand real business. But I didn't tell her that. Instead, I signed the papers. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Allison got the house, half my known savings, and half my 401k. About $200,000 total, which she probably thought was a decent haul. She had no idea she'd left $18 million on the table. The day the divorce was final, I got a text from her. "No hard feelings. I hope you find someone who makes you happy." I deleted it without responding. 2 weeks later, I was having dinner at a restaurant downtown when I saw them. Allison and Jared sitting at a corner table, celebrating something. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, probably bought with the settlement money. He was gesturing wildly, telling some story that had her laughing like I'd never heard her laugh. They looked happy. Genuinely, radiantly happy in a way that made my chest ache, with something that wasn't quite jealousy but wasn't quite relief either. I paid my check and left without them seeing me. That night, I made another decision that would change everything. I called my lawyer and had him start the paperwork to liquidate my investments. All of them. $18 million converted to cash and moved to accounts that couldn't be traced back to me. Then I disappeared. Not physically, I kept my job, my apartment, my routine, but I disappeared from the life I'd built, from the social circles Allison and I had shared, from the friends who had chosen sides in the divorce. I became invisible, unremarkable, forgettable, and I started planning. Jared's business empire was built on borrowed money and borrowed time. He owed favors to people who didn't like to be kept waiting, had made promises he couldn't keep to investors who were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. His whole operation was a Ponzi scheme dressed up in expensive suits and flashy marketing. All it would take was one domino to bring it all down. I became that domino. It started small. An anonymous tip to the IRS about unreported income. A casual mention to a journalist friend about some irregularities in Jared's latest venture. A few well-placed phone calls to investors asking innocent questions that made them start asking their own questions. Within 6 months, Jared's empire was crumbling. The IRS froze his accounts. His investors pulled out. His creditors came calling. The man who'd stolen my wife because he understood ambition was suddenly facing bankruptcy and potential criminal charges. Allison stood by him at first. Love conquers all and all that. But when the money ran out and the lawyers got expensive, when their fancy apartment got repossessed, and Jared started drinking heavily and taking his frustrations out on everyone around him, love started to look a lot less appealing. She called me on a Tuesday night in March, almost a year after our divorce was finalized. "Tom, it's Allison. Can we talk?" "What do you want?" "I think I made a mistake. With Jared, with the divorce, with everything." "That's unfortunate. I was wondering, is there any chance we could try again? Start over?" I thought about the $18 million, about the empire I could build, about the life I could offer her if I wanted to. I thought about the woman who'd called me boring and predictable, who'd traded our marriage for excitement and ambition. "No," I said. "Tom, please, I know I hurt you, but you didn't hurt me, Allison. You freed me." I hung up and never answered her calls again. 6 months later, I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved back in with her parents. Jared was in prison for fraud. The exciting, ambitious life she'd wanted had turned into a cautionary tale about the dangers of wanting too much too fast. I felt nothing when I heard the news. No satisfaction, no vindication, no regret. Just the quiet contentment of a man who'd learned to value his own worth over other people's opinions. The $18 million had grown to $22 million by then. I used some of it to start a new company, this time keeping my name attached to it. Within 2 years, I'd built it into a major player in the cybersecurity field. The boring, predictable computer guy had created something that mattered, something that protected people and made the digital world a little bit safer. I never married again. Never felt the need to. I dated, had relationships, made friends who valued me for who I was, rather than who they thought I should be. I bought a house on the water, traveled when I wanted to, gave anonymously to causes I believed in. I lived well, and sometimes late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd think about that Father's Day photo. Dad and Kyle and the boys, all wearing matching shirts, all part of something I'd never been invited to join. I'd think about the choice Dad had made, death over apology, pride over love. I'd think about the choice Allison had made, excitement over stability, ambition over contentment, and I'd think about the choice I'd made to value myself enough to walk away from people who didn't value me. Some doors close forever. Some bridges burn completely. Some relationships end, not with explosions, but with the quiet recognition that they were never really there to begin with. I learned that from them. And in learning it, I learned something else. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well without the people who never deserved you in the first place. The last time I saw any of them was at Dad's funeral, through a computer screen, watching strangers mourn a man who'd chosen to die rather than admit he was wrong. Kyle never recovered from losing everything. Last I heard, he was working construction for someone else's company, living paycheck to paycheck, drinking too much and blaming everyone but himself for how his life had turned out. Mom died peacefully in the assisted living facility 2 years later, never knowing that her disappointing son had paid for her comfort in her final years. I went to her funeral, stood in the back, and left before anyone could recognize me. Allison tried to reach out a few more times over the years, usually when she was between jobs or relationships or hope. I never responded. She was part of a life I'd outgrown, a chapter I'd closed, a lesson I'd learned. The real family, the one that mattered, was the one I built for myself. Colleagues who respected my work, friends who valued my company, a community that benefited from my success. People who saw me as I was, not as a disappointment or a safety net or a backup plan. I kept that Father's Day card, though, the one I'd made when I was 7 with the crayon drawing and the careful handwriting. Not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but as a reminder of what I'd been worth all along. World's best dad, it said. And maybe someday, if I ever have kids of my own, I'll live up to that title in ways my father never could. But that's a different story, for a different day. This story ends here, with a man who learned to value himself, who walked away from people who didn't deserve him, and who built something better from the ashes of what came before. Sometimes the hardest cut is the cleanest one. Sometimes the best revenge is no revenge at all. Just the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, success well earned, and peace well deserved.